can leave a comment about it. Also, if you subscribe to the playlist, because I forget to put it in certain playlists sometimes, which I forgot to do when I uploaded it. There you go. All right. Ooh, we may cover a diagram or may not. But from our previous lesson and just some things that have kind of been on my heart, first off, anybody have any questions from our previous lesson or any thoughts? No? Okay, it's been that long,
I'm
huh?
good.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I mentioned this in our previous lesson, and I mentioned that, and it was around the place where I was talking about how Greek is kind of has the pronunciation of the Koine Greek. Erasmus gave it kind of like a Latin-based pronunciation. The reason that I said that I teach Bible classes in Spanish with a 4th to 5th grade level of Spanish is specifically this. The gospel is not for the intellect, the brain. Did that make sense? The gospel is not for the intellect. The gospel is for the heart and soul. Salvation is not for the intellect. Salvation is for the heart and soul. Does that make sense?
Yes.
We can do, even in our reading, I mean, as I mentioned, when we read, we're going to be processing it with our natural mind. And so we're going to be learning about, in fact, I think Kay this morning, she said, I was reading in Ezekiel. And then she just started, reading the passage to me where she was reading it. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And then she said, but then I read a couple of verses before and it's like, oh, okay. But the passage in Ezekiel was something like, and you will eat their flesh and this and that. And just, it was like, holy mackerel, this is like gross. I mean, it was like savage carnage, carnage. And then, but then when she read in context, before it said, I'll raise up the beasts of the fields and the birds of the air, and those are the ones that are going to do all this, ravishing and stuff. Anyway, it may not mean much, but it's a whole lot. Context, and I think I've already shared this, context is not everything, but context really helps to get a picture of what's going on, of who's doing what and when. But remember, everything is Christ. Have I already covered this?
Not in those words, but yeah, basically.
Okay, good. Because a lot of scholars, which I totally agree with, will push context, and you can't just pick a verse out and just comment on it or whatever without looking at the context that it's in, and that's what it was. Can you do me a favor, Simon? Go grab my phone. It's over on top of the blue bag. I wrote a response to an email I got from Rita, this one lady in Costa Rica. She shoots questions every once in a while, and sometimes she just shares with me.
Is she watching this?
I'm not sure. I doubt it. She speaks Spanish. Oh. But regardless, she watches the other classes that are parallel to this as well. Correct. And so this is
So she listens to it she watches it with the Spanish subtitles.
If they have subtitles, I don't know. I don't know.
YouTube has like an AI algorithm that does
Oh, wow. Cool. Well, cool. Well, she had a question concerning a certain verse, and she wanted to know, well, is it this or this or this, or what do you think? I said, I'm going to translate this from Spanish to English real quick. I gave her kind of like my feel for what the passage was, and then I said, but we're always to hear what our God is speaking to our heart concerning His Son. You know, so in like a passage, if you're trying to find the meaning or the interpretation or the of a certain passage, you can look at the context, you can look at the historical culture on it and get a really good understanding of what was going on during the time and how things were being addressed, and say, oh, okay, this is what it was speaking about. Okay, but remember, the Bible, that is the Old Testament scriptures and the New Testament scriptures, the Bible was presented, given of God by His Spirit inspired man to write down what God was speaking with a purpose, and that purpose is always to direct, lead, guide, and bring our heart under the unto the person of His Son. That is the ultimate purpose and goal of the scriptures of our Bible. That's why we have a Bible, to have an encounter with the Son, the only Son of the living God. That's what it amounts to. Now, in that, we will learn correct doctrine. We will learn correct teaching. But that's not the goal. That's not why God gave the scriptures. God gave the scriptures to direct, lead, guide, and bring our heart and our soul under the person of His Son. That's it. We always have to have this before us. And I think I did cover that in a previous lesson. All right. So I said, I gave her a little bit of, of what I thought the passage meant, what I believe the passage meant. Then I said, in looking at the context and the way the conversations back and forth were going, but then I said this, but we are always to hear what our God is speaking to our heart concerning His Son. The scriptures are a marvelous thing from God. They are a living testimony that testify of the life, Christ Himself. There are times that the interpretation can look correct according to our thoughts. There are times that the interpretation doesn't look correct according to our thoughts or according to what we know. But the purpose of the scriptures is not so that it can look correct, but instead to direct, turn, guide, and bring our heart under the person of Jesus Christ. This is what the scriptures always serve. This is the purpose that the scriptures always serve. This is what happened now concerning things, having our interpretation of a passage, verse, or scripture or book, and it not looking correct according to what we understand. This is what happened several times to the religious leaders when they looked at what Jesus said or was doing, and they compared it with what they saw in the Old Testament. It didn't look correct, even though it was correct. It didn't look correct in their eyes, even though it was God Himself presenting it, with the purpose to turn the heart unto His Son. The reason why I say that is because think of this, the Sabbath day. All right, you've got the Sabbath day. And so here comes Jesus. He comes into the synagogue, which was his custom to do. And the synagogue would be like a modern day church building, I guess. Kind of the same thought. So Jesus came in, and so the Pharisees, this passage was specifically concerning the Pharisees. The Pharisees asked him, is it lawful, according to the Old Testament, according to the law, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? And they said that, and you can read it. It says they said that to catch him in his words. And so Jesus comes across basically saying, he gives them a parable. Which of you guys, if on the Sabbath, if his sheep falls into a pit or a ditch, you don't go and you pull him out. You do something good. You do something beneficial. And then so Jesus said, yes, basically yes, it is good to do good on the Sabbath. And then there was a guy, of course, with this crippled hand, I think, and he healed him and made him totally whole. And so they got upset because Jesus, quote unquote, did something on the Sabbath. Now, the thing is, they were looking at the law, the first 5 books of Moses, the Old Testament, right? Pentateuch, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, first 5 books. And there's I think it's either in Exodus or Numbers, forgive me, I can't remember the passage, but you can look it up, where the children of Israel are in the wilderness, and God has already given, the quote-unquote law, but it's really the testimony of his Son, and there's these laws and ordinances and all this stuff as well. And so it was on a Sunday I can't say Sunday, it was on a Sabbath, a Jewish Sabbath, Hebrew Sabbath, and they see this guy picking up sticks. I mean, he's just picking up sticks. And so it's like, they bring the guy to Moses and say, what do we do with him? And then, do you guys know the story?
This sounds familiar, I think.
Okay. So all he's doing is picking up sticks on the Sabbath. They bring him to Moses. What do we do with this guy? Moses consults the Lord. The Lord says, stone him. And the congregation of Israel stoned him for picking up sticks. Well, that's one thing. But see, the whole thing, as Jesus said, if you believed Moses, you would believe me because Moses wrote about me. And then he says, but if you don't believe his writings, how will you believe my word? And they believed his writings, but they truly didn't believe his writings. Because had they truly believed his writings, they would have understood that his writings actually spoke of Jesus Christ. Right? So then, that's what's in the mind of the Pharisees. It's like, if a guy got stoned just for picking up sticks, then pretty much any action is condemnable by death on the Sabbath. No work, no labor on the Sabbath. Man is to be, here's the key word, at rest, doing nothing. And that's the key word, man doing nothing on the Sabbath. Well, of course, the Pharisees, they weren't as sticklers. I think this is correct. I don't think the Pharisees were as sticklers as the scribes were. Was it the scribes or the Sadducees? It was one of those. Might have been the Sadducees. I mean, really sticklers. We did this way, we did this way, then we did this way. Da. Well, the Pharisees were a little lax. It's like, well, we'll emphasize this, but this one isn't as weighty as this other thing to do. And that's why Jesus called them on it. He said, okay, which of you guys, if a sheep falls, into a ditch or something, on the Sabbath day, don't you just go and lift him out, pick him up? Basically, they were hypocrites. And but the thing is that because of Jesus' own words concerning the Sabbath, concerning Moses wrote of me, Jesus himself is the literal Sabbath. He is the rest of God. Jesus could literally say, this, here's the passage, I think it's like in John. These are not my words. The Father in me doeth the works. He could very plainly say, not I, but the Father. In that respect, Jesus was always at rest. He literally never did anything, but the Father in him did the works. Of course, the Pharisees didn't see that. They were blind because it requires a miracle of God to see this. But that was just something like in context, and how that we can have a cultural context and understanding of what's going on, and yet totally and completely miss the Lord in it. So, did it make sense?
Mhm.
Did y'all get it? Questions or comments? None. My thought would have been, someone would ask, what does this have to do with studying the Bible? Well, everything. Did either of you guys just think about that? Like, why is he telling us this story about picking up sticks on the Sabbath? Did that cross your mind at all?
It had to do with context, right? You were
Yes,
talking about context.
exactly. Well, it not only had to do with context, it had to do with cultural history, but it had to do with the ultimate purpose for which God gave the Scriptures, for which God has provided provision, His Old Testament and New Testament. It ultimately all has to, it does. It doesn't have to. It does. Design of God to direct, lead, guide, and bring our heart under the person of His Son. That's the ultimate purpose of the Scriptures. And the Pharisees, of course, they missed Him. I think that's what you mentioned in our previous class. They missed it. They missed the whole point. Right? So it's kind of like, okay, what's the point of us being in these lessons? These youth lessons, man, is it to escape the regular church service? No. Is it so we're no longer in the children's church? No. The whole point of any service, of anything concerning God and the things of God, is for our hearts actually to be directed, led, and guided, and brought under the person of His Son. That is it. That is the ultimate. It's kind of like this. A person who's not born again, and being born again, is different than growing up in a Christian household. See, I did not really grow up in a Christian household. What I mean by that is, every Sunday I'm learning the Bible stories and all this. And every Sunday I'm going to children's church, or every Sunday I'm going to youth group. I didn't grow up like that. I wasn't born again. There was no purpose for me, to go to church at all, But growing up in a Christian household is something completely different than being born again. Or shall I say, being born again is something completely different than growing up in a Christian household. See, one, man can do. The other, only God can do. Only God can do. And there were times, and I think I did mention it, when I was like in high school, I would go to youth groups or youth services or Sunday services because my friends would go. In fact, I'll just be honest about this. The times that I went to Sunday service when I was in high school are the times that my band members invited me, because in high school I had a band, and those guys went to church on Sunday, and also my girlfriend went to church on Sunday. So if they invited me, hey, I'm going to go because my friends are there. But I wasn't made to go. I wanted to go because they were there. Now I will say this. That if the thing, T-H-I-N-G, whatever it is of God, it is without doubt designed of God to direct, lead, guide, and bring under the purpose of His Son. Under the purpose of it. Person, I keep saying purpose.
You said it again.
God's ultimate purpose is His very Son, and the heart coming to His Son, but the person of His Son. And this was it. So even though I was going, get this, I was quote unquote going to church for all the wrong reasons, the Spirit of God was still taking what was being shared, taking it and using it behind the scenes to work upon the ground of my heart for God's expected end. I didn't even know it. I didn't know it at the time. So anything like children's church, these youth group lessons, just speaking to everyone out there, any Wednesday service, prayer service, anything like that that you go to, if these scriptures are being read or expounded upon, the Spirit of God is using it behind the scenes. Another thing that I noticed in our previous lesson, that as I stated, because some things just catch my attention, and I say things, but I say things from like skipping parts in between. Like I'll say something like letter A, and I'll skip over and make a statement like letter D, and I don't really mention the B and C that led me to say this statement. So that's why at the beginning of the lesson I said the reason for saying that I do Bible classes in Spanish with a 4th or 5th grade level of Spanish is because the gospel is not for the intellect. No, the gospel is for the heart and for the soul. And therefore, get this, therefore, you can find a person who has just been born again and really not know anything concerning the scriptures and just reading the scriptures to others who aren't born again, and God will use that to cause them to be born again, to bring their hearts unto the Lord. Even if the person speaking has no clue of what even they're reading, because the gospel is not for the intellect. And with that also, because I remember it now, I'd mentioned there's basically 3 different types of Bible versions or Bible translations. There are the more literal translations. Okay, let's do it this way. There are the more literal translations, and then on the opposite end of the spectrum, there are the more paraphrased. The more paraphrased are kind of like when it's in your own words. And then everything else is kind of in between, and it will lean to one side or the other. It'll lean more to a more literal side, or it'll lean more to a paraphrase. But see, I've read paraphrased Bibles and really been blessed by what they say. And you can say, yeah, but they just took a meaning and just kind of said it in their own words. But yes, but remember, the gospel is not for the intellect. The gospel is for the heart and for the soul. So it requires and see, that's the thing, is that God provides the scriptures with the same purpose for every single soul, for every single heart, whether the person be educated or not educated, whether they be free or not free. And in the time they had like slavery, and it was a common acceptance. We don't have slavery anymore, at least not in the U.S. and other countries. Did you guys know that that for the longest time education was only for male children and not for female children?
Yep.
And that you're thinking like, whoa, that's kind of weird. So the women were typically uneducated compared to the men. Well, with God, it's like He doesn't look on the outward; He looks at a soul. The outward is like everything else that man looks at. God provided the scriptures for the heart and the soul of man, whether that is educated, uneducated, male, female, bond-free. Bring any verse to mind. Paul is saying it. Anyway, but he was speaking the mind of God. But see, that's why we can be reading even a paraphrased Bible and God can still use it. All right, going on. Oh, here we go. It's page 1. I was looking at this and I looked at, we'll see how far we get. I looked at the actual outline, and this is actually like lesson 2 or 3 from the outline, from the actual outline. So there you go. Remember, even the goal is not going through a lesson book. That's not the goal. All right. What's the goal, guys?
To lay the ground of our heart. Or actually,
No, that's
the goal of the Bible, but we want to find a relationship with
to
Jesus.
direct, guide, and bring.
Lead, guide.
Lead.
Yeah,
What might have been in
direct,
there?
lead.
Direct, guide, and bring. Lead and bring.
Which one?
There's 4, but that not in that order. To direct, lead, guide, and bring our hearts to the person of His Son.
That's it. That's it. That is, get this, many may not understand this, may not agree with this, or may have never even heard of this, but that is literally the purpose of everything. Not only the scriptures, everything.
Mic drop.
Sorry, guys, for the loud noise. You need to drop it on the soft, cushy
No, you're
stuff.
supposed to drop it on the mic. 'Cause it's a mic drop.
Oh, well, no, don't drop it on the
Just
mic.
drop
It'll be
the mic.
worse. We're not going to drop the microphone. That costs too much money to be dropping around. Okay, so with this lesson, it's called Reading Part 1. We'll see how many parts we end up with, but it's Reading Part 1. The subtitle
That was
is...
a long introduction.
Yeah, it was a long introduction. I don't know how long, but it was a long introduction. All right. The subtitle is Continuing. Okay. Jesus also said, if you continue. That's John chapter 8, verse 31 and through 32. This is actually what he said, verse 31. So Jesus was saying to those, get this, Jews who believed him, if you continue in my word, you are truly my disciple. You are truly disciples of mine. Excuse me. And verse 32, you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. If you continue, or Jesus was saying to those Jews who had believed in him, if you continue in my word, you are truly disciples of mine, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. Now, I know that people apply that to several things across the board, and but it's only in Jesus' words as we continue in his word. And see, to me, he says, you will know the truth. And to me, the truth is not a bunch of facts, plural. To me, the truth is the person of Christ himself. Because Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, the life. So even though we will gain a lot of facts and we will learn a lot of true things, plural, the facts and the true things are to serve the purpose, once again, the ultimate purpose of everything, to direct, lead, guide, and bring unto the person of his Son, unto the very person himself. Not to our concept of Jesus from what we have read, but to the actual person himself. Okay. So Jesus also said, if you continue, that's John chapter 8, verse 31 through 32, which we read. This is one of the main things I wanted to emphasize, just the point of continuing to read the Bible. At the beginning, it is not as much, get this, studying as it is just reading. Just reading. And it's not with an emphasis of, okay, I'm going to begin reading and studying. No. How about just read? Just read the scriptures. Just read the scriptures. Because they, remember in the Old Testament, the Lord had them, God said, you're going to put these, the phylacteries, remember? You're going to put these verses at the doorposts of your house, inside your house, at your gate, and you put little things on with the verses on them, and little things, the phylacteries that hang from your, dangle in front of your eyes with the verses, so you can always have the scriptures before you. Yeah, he didn't get it. But he wanted them in the scriptures, because the scriptures actually, it's like a greenhouse. They create a particular environment that is more conducive for the Spirit of God to work in. Now, having said that, it requires a miracle of God, whether you are reading the Bible or not, to get your attention to consider Jesus. It requires a miracle of God, hands down. But get this, if you are reading the scriptures and if you are continuing in reading the scriptures, then God, by His Spirit, has already been doing something in your heart. You know, it's like if, just an example, if I hand Zion a Bible and say, okay, use this and it'll prepare the ground of your heart so you can know the Lord. It says, okay, sets it aside. But if you pick it up, it's like, what I handed you has a certain purpose to it. That's the one purpose it serves. Though you'll gain a lot of other information about it, but that's actually the one purpose it serves. So if you find yourself reading the scriptures, then the Spirit of God has actually been doing something in your heart behind the scenes beforehand. All right. As we're reading, the things, and this is how I phrased it, the things that stick out to us, that catch our attention, that seem interesting to us, the terms, the names, the phrases, events, peoples, places, things, orders, actions, etc., are what often become our studies. And I make that comment on my own experience. But I probably actually already asked you guys this, and it might have been in a previous lesson, but when in your reading of the scriptures, has anything just caught your attention that made you think, oh, wow, or what? Or that doesn't make sense, or anything like that? Yes, okay. Now, that having happened, did you just say, oh, wow, okay, whatever, and you keep on reading? Or did you actually, I wonder what is going on here, and you actually take like the next step and kind of look at it a little deeper? Have you guys done that? Good. Good. Look at you guys. All right, man. Someone's been doing a good job in children's church. All right. Good. Actually, literally, that's how I ended up with this lesson book. Is just a lot of things like that I jotted down, and it's like, all these work together, or all these together are basically presenting the same thing, right? The goal, once again, is not to come up with a lesson book or something to share or something to speak to others. That is not the goal. But when something does get our attention, like you guys, just mentioned, you do search it out. You look at it a little deeper, a little further, just to see what may be underlying there that you're unaware of, and that's usually Bible study are steps further than just Bible reading. But right now the emphasis is just upon reading, because with a couple of examples, I used to actually do this. These studies are developed from what we have come across in our normal reading. All right. This should include, get this, reading through one or possibly more of the books of the Bible at the same time. Beginning with a book and reading a portion of it every day until you have read through the entire book. Then you start another book, etc. There was a time when I would be reading like two different books at the same time, something in the New Testament and something in the Old Testament, because you don't want to neglect the Old Testament. Though when I was first born again, I think the majority of the time I just spent in the New Testament, and I hardly ever read the Old Testament until I guess the Spirit of God just led me to start reading in the Old Testament. But when I was reading in the Old Testament, then what I would do is whatever I was reading, I would just kind of read through the whole entire book while I was reading through a whole entire book in the New Testament as well. So maybe one day I'll read the New Testament, the other day read the Old Testament, or on the same day read something out of the New Testament and something out of the Old Testament. Now, for me, it wasn't so much so I could come up with a lesson or anything. This was like years before I even went to Bible school. For me, it was just so I could get a basic knowledge of what the scriptures, what the Bible was actually saying. Like I said, I didn't grow up in children's church. So when I read the account of the four evangelists concerning the gospel of Christ, like by the it was either somewhere around the second or third presentation of the gospel, it hit me. It's like, wow, these guys are saying the same thing. I didn't know that. I thought every single book was something completely different. But about the second or third account of the gospel of Christ, what?
Mark or Luke?
Yeah, it was one of actually the first gospel I read was Luke.
Oh, well then you wrote
Yeah.
them out of order.
Yeah, exactly. But that's kind of how the Lord led. So I was like, oh, okay, I've never read it before. Why not? But it was a surprise to me that they were all speaking the same thing. Now, it might not be a surprise to you guys. You may have already, wow, well, that's nothing. I've known that. But see, it was to me, not really having that exposure to the scriptures. All right. So then you start another book. This is reading, now, doing that and reading the scriptures like that, this is reading the Bible just to enjoy. Now, I'm going to define what I just said. Does someone really have to twist your arm to spend time with that which you love? The answer should be no. Whatever you're into, hey, no one has to twist your arm and say, hey, you need to do that. No, you're already doing that. Of course not. We make time in our daily schedule for this. Sometimes it takes time, and here's the key. Sometimes it takes time to develop a love for the scriptures. That requires a miracle of God. Because it's not so much a love for the scriptures, like the scriptures are something in and of themselves. No, it's like when you begin to understand and see by the Spirit of God, all this is by the Spirit of God, okay, that the scriptures serve a purpose, a greater purpose of God. And if God has realized that purpose in your heart, then you want that realization more and more. Like when your heart, by the Spirit of God, performing a miracle in your heart, turns your heart unto Christ, and your heart comes from your knowledge, your intellect, your mind, unto the eternal mind, the mind of Christ, it's like everything's all new. It's like a different, it's like literally someone turned the light on. You know, and the thing is that you didn't know that there was something lacking until that happened. You thought everything was all right until that miracle of God happened. It's like, oh my gosh. That's the way it happens. You know, it's I can't say the same experience, but like before a soul's born again, they're going about, whether they're religious or not, they're going about in a merry way. The Spirit of God performs a miracle in their heart and brings their heart under the person of Christ, where they are able to receive salvation, able to be born again. And it's like, holy mackerel, what just happened? And immediately you think, this is what it's all about. And there's such a huge contrast, and I guess the older you are, the more the contrast is, from death unto life, because the more you've experienced death beforehand versus life. So the older it is, the more of a contrast. But from that moment onward, after soul is born again, then in the reading of the scriptures, it's still the same purpose, to direct, lead, guide, and bring our heart unto the person of His Son. But now it's from our heart submitted to our mind unto God's eternal mind, the mind of Christ. When that happens, it's like turning on the light bulb. It's like, holy mackerel, it's literally all about Jesus. It's like, I knew it was all about Jesus, but I didn't know it was really, really all about Jesus. And it is. Bless you. So everybody's letting out. So before we start getting slamming of the door and everything going on, questions and/or comments?
We need to do the thumbnail outro.
Okay, the thumbnail outro, everybody. To the left or to the right, or does it matter?
It doesn't matter. I mean, I just do
All
this.
right.
Just do the right.
We'll do it. Okay, hold on. Who's it about?
Jesus.
Jesus.